$1.9 billion.
It is a number that is almost difficult to wrap your head around, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we throw around words like millions and billions in politics all the time, and it almost becomes white noise.
It does.
But let's just pause and sit with a specific figure for a second. 1.9 billion. That is the price tag of secrecy in the 2024 federal election cycle.
Precisely. And to be really clear, that isn't the total cost of the election, which was obviously much, much higher. That 1.9 billion figure is specifically the amount of, quote, dark money that flooded into the system.
Right. And that's really why we're here today. We are popping the hood on the political machine because, honestly, when I was looking at the numbers from the Brennan Center and Open Secrets, my jaw it hit the floor, this number. It's a record.
It is a staggering record. I mean, if you look back just one cycle to 2020, the record for dark money contributions was roughly $1 billion.
It's just $1 billion.
Right, just $1 billion. So in the span of only 4 years, we have seen that number almost double.
Which suggests this isn't just a trend or, a blip on the radar. This is an explosion. It feels like a fundamental shift in the very architecture of how we elect people.
It is a fundamental shift. And it's a shift away from a system where, in theory, you know who is trying to influence your vote, which is, the bedrock of democratic transparency.
That's a good point.
The whole point, we're moving toward a system where the ultimate source of the money, the person or the corporation actually writing that check, is deliberately hidden from public view.
And that's the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just going to throw spreadsheets and numbers at you. We really want to understand how this money moves. Because when you start reading these reports, the tax filings, the FEC disclosures, it feels a bit like a shell game.
It is a shell game, or maybe Russian nesting dolls. I think that's a perfect analogy.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
You open up a super PAC, which is supposed to disclose its donors, and what do you find inside? A nonprofit. So you open up the nonprofit, and maybe there's a shell company inside that. You open the shell company, and, well, that's usually where the trail goes cold.
Exactly. And we're going to name names today. We're going to look at the heavyweights on both sides of the aisle. On the left, we have the 1630 Fund.
A massive player, an absolute juggernaut in the progressive space.
And then on the right, you've got Americans for Prosperity and the Koch Network.
The originators, really. They wrote the playbook for this kind of modern political network building in many ways.
And I want to be crystal clear right from the start. This is not a partisan hit job. If there's one thing the data shows us, it's that both major parties have embraced these tools with absolute enthusiasm.
Completely. It is a bipartisan arms race. Both sides are utilizing these mechanisms to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Our goal here is just to be impartial analysts of the architecture itself. We're looking back from our vantage point here in 2026 at what happened in 2024 to see the whole picture.
We've got a whole stack of sources in front of us. Reports from the Brennan Center for Justice, financial breakdowns from Open Secrets, a ton of ad spending data from the Wesleyan Media Project, and some really, really dense legal breakdowns of tax code.
Which I promise I will try to make interesting. The tax code is actually where all the drama lives.
I know you will. So let's unpack this thing. Section 1, the architecture of dark money, or as I've started calling it, the shell game.
Good name for it.
So to understand the game, you have to understand the players. The two main vehicles we keep seeing in federal elections are super PACs and these things called 501c4s.
Right. And I think most people have a vague idea of what these are, but it's the interaction between them where the real magic happens.
So let's start with the super PAC. We've all been hearing about them since the Citizens United ruling back in 2010.
Correct. After 2010, super PACs became the big dogs on the block. The Supreme Court essentially ruled that money is a form of speech, and therefore you can't really limit independent expenditures. So a super PAC can raise unlimited funds from corporations, from unions, from individuals.
No caps.
No caps. They can spend unlimited amounts to advocate for or against candidates.
But, and this is the really crucial constraint, they must disclose their donors to the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. Transparency was the trade-off for all that unlimited spending.
Exactly. In theory, if a corporation gives $1 million to a super PAC, we see it. The public is supposed to know.
In theory. But then you have the 501c4 organizations, and this is where we have to, pull up the tax code because this is where the alchemy happens.
This is the social welfare designation. 501c4s are classified by the IRS not as political committees, but as social welfare organizations. Historically, this was meant for things like, say, the local volunteer fire department or the Sierra Club or the NRA.
Right, groups that exist to benefit the community or a specific cause, not to elect a specific person.
Exactly. And because they're social welfare organizations, they have two huge advantages. One, they're tax exempt. Two, and this is the big one, they do not have to disclose their donors publicly.
That's the blackout curtain right there. But here's the billion-dollar question. How does a social welfare group get to run political attack ads? Because the IRS says politics can't be their primary purpose.
That phrase, primary purpose, is the load-bearing wall for this entire $1.9 billion industry. The IRS has never strictly defined it in a quantitative way, but it's generally interpreted by everyone to mean less than 50%.
So, wait, let me get this straight. If I have $100 million in my 501c pot, as long as I spend $50 million and $1 on educational issues, saving whales or discussing the national debt, I can spend the other $49,999,999 on vicious political attack ads.
Theoretically, yes, as long as the political activity is the secondary purpose, but it gets even murkier than that.
Of course it does.
Because what even counts as political? This brings us to the distinction between electioneering and issue advocacy.
Ah, the famous Buckley v. Vallejo distinction. The magic words.
Yes, the 8 magic words. Back in 1976, the Supreme Court ruled that unless an ad uses very specific words advocating for a specific election result, words like vote for, elect, support, defeat, or vote against, it can be classified as issue advocacy, not electioneering.
Okay, so let's role play this. If I run an ad, a 30-second spot, that says, Senator Smith is a corrupt liar who hates puppies and voted to destroy the local park, but I never explicitly say vote against Senator Smith. That's just, discussing an issue.
Legally, in many, many contexts, yes, that is issue advocacy. You're simply educating the public about Senator Smith's questionable stance on puppies and parks.
Even though any human being with a pulse watching that ad knows exactly what I'm telling them to do.
To the viewer, it's a political attack ad, 100%. But to the IRS and the FEC, it's social welfare. And because it's not technically electioneering, that spending often doesn't even count toward that 49% political limit we just talked about.
So the limit is actually much higher because half your attack ads don't even count against the cap?
Yep.
That is just wild.
It's a canyon of wiggle room. And then you have the gray money shift. This is how the 501c4 and the super PAC work together in this beautiful, dark dance.
Right, the loophole. Explain how the money moves from the dark room into the lit room.
Okay, so a wealthy donor, let's say a billionaire who doesn't want their customers to know who they support, or a corporation that's fearing a boycott, writes a massive check, say $10 million, to a 501c4. That transaction is private. Nobody sees it.
It goes into the black box.
Then the 501c4 takes that money, or a portion of it, and donates it to a super PAC that's aligned with its goals.
And because the super PAC has to disclose its donors, it lists the 501c4 as the source of the funds.
Exactly. So if you go and look at the super PAC's filings, it doesn't say John Doe billionaire gave $10 million. It says the Committee for a Better Tomorrow gave $10 million. The original source has been effectively and legally scrubbed.
It's essentially money laundering, but it's legal.
Critics certainly use that term. In the industry, they call it gray money because the immediate donor is known, it's the nonprofit, but the actual source is completely dark. And in 2024, this mechanism just went into overdrive.
I'm looking at the data point here from the Brennan Center. In 2024, shell companies and these 501c nonprofits gave $1.3 billion directly to super PACs.
$1.3 billion. That is more than the prior 2 election cycles combined. It signals that donors have figured out that this is the cleanest, safest way to move massive amounts of capital without facing any public scrutiny.
But it's not just about who gives the money, right?
Yeah.
It's also about the timing of the spend. The rules get even weirder when you run the ad.
Ah, yes. The reporting windows. This is a classic tactic used by the pros.
This is the One Nation example in Wisconsin, right? I really want to break this down because it shows just how specific and, frankly, how clever these operatives get.
It's a perfect case study. So One Nation is a major dark money group, a 501c4 that's aligned with Senate Republicans. Now, in 2024, the Wisconsin Senate race was incredibly tight, a total toss-up, very high stakes.
Okay, so the FEC has a rule that requires groups to report electioneering communications if they air within 60 days of a general election. That's the reporting window.
Correct. Before that 60-day window kicks in, the rules are much, much looser. So look at what One Nation did. The Wisconsin primary was on August 13th. The 60-day window for the general election started on September 3rd.
Okay, so that leaves a little gap. What's that, about 3 weeks?
Exactly, a 3-week regulatory dead zone. And between August 14th and September 3rd, One Nation aired 3,700 television spots in Wisconsin.
3,700 ads. In 3 weeks. That is saturation bombing. You wouldn't be able to turn on your TV without seeing one.
You wouldn't. It cost them nearly $4 million. And because they stopped airing them just before the September 3rd deadline, and because they very carefully avoided those 8 magic words like vote against,
Let me guess.
the result was zero reporting to the FEC for that specific $4 million spend.
So $4 million drops into a key Senate race, hammers a candidate, shapes voter opinion right before the final stretch and on the federal books. It's like it didn't even happen.
Technically it happened, but it wasn't an election expenditure. It was just, social welfare.
Yeah.
Educating the public.
That is absolutely fascinating and, frankly, terrifying at the same time. Okay, so we see the mechanism. We see the timing tricks. Now let's look at the heavyweights who are actually swinging these hammers. And we had to start with the left because, according to the data, they are actually leading the charge in dark money spending right now.
That's right. There's often this perception that dark money is a purely Republican phenomenon, largely because of the fame of the Koch brothers in the 2010s. But in 2024, the data shows that Democrats actually outspent Republicans in dark money. It was about $1.2 billion to $664 million.
A huge gap.
A huge gap. And the heavyweight champion on the left is, without a doubt, the 1630 Fund.
The 1630 Fund. It sounds like some kind of secret society from a novel, but it's actually an incredibly sophisticated business structure.
It really is. It operates under a model called fiscal sponsorship, and it's all managed by a for-profit consulting firm called Arabella Advisors.
I want to dig into this fiscal sponsorship concept
Yeah.
because I think it's the secret sauce to their success. In the old days, if I wanted to start a political group, let's say Mothers for Clean Air, I'd have to incorporate, form a board, file with the IRS, hire an accountant, rent an office.
Oh, that takes months. 6 months, maybe a year if you get bogged down in paperwork. In politics, 6 months is an eternity. By the time you're finally set up, the election you cared about is over.
It's over. Exactly. So the 1630 Fund acts as this giant administrative umbrella. I can walk in with a checkbook and an idea, and they basically say, come on in, the water's fine.
That's a great way to put it. They say, you don't need to incorporate. You are now a project of the 1630 Fund. They provide the legal status, the payroll, the HR, the compliance lawyers. It's a plug-and-play platform for activism.
So they can spin up these groups almost instantly.
Instantly. And this allows for what critics have called a narrative swarm. You might see a flurry of ads from groups called Arizonans United for Healthcare, or Michigan Families for Economic Prosperity, or Floridians for a Fair Shake.
And to the average voter, these look like totally independent grassroots groups that are just popping up in their home state. It looks organic. It looks like a groundswell of public opinion.
But if you pull the mask off, they are all administratively part of the same massive DC hub. There's different dockets in the 1630 Fund's filing cabinet.
And the amount of money moving through this single hub is astronomical.
It's huge. In 2023 alone, so the year before the election, they raised $181 million and spent about $141 million. But to get a sense of their full power, look back at 2020, they spent $410 million.
Wait, $410 million?
$410 million. In 2020, the 1630 Fund actually outspent the Democratic National Committee, the DNC.
They outspent the actual party.
Yes. That is how powerful this shadow infrastructure has become. It essentially rivals the actual party in terms of raw financial muscle.
So where is all this money coming from? Do we have any idea?
Well, because they're a 501c4, they don't have to disclose their donors, but we do have some data points from leaked documents and their own tax filings. In 2023, for example, just 4 donors accounted for 2/3 of their entire revenue.
Just 4 sources, 4 people or entities. That is a massive concentration of influence over the entire progressive movement.
It is. And one single anonymous donor gave $50.5 million.
$50 million. That is a lot of influence for one person to have over which candidates get supported, which issues get pushed.
It certainly is. And this brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the 1630 Fund. what's known as the foreign national loophole.
This is the part of the research that really surprised me. We all learn in civics class that foreign nationals, no matter how wealthy, cannot donate to U.S. candidates. It's illegal. Hard stop. Election law 101.
Correct. It is illegal for foreign nationals to donate to candidates or to political committees like a party or a PAC. However, federal law is curiously silent on foreign donations when it comes to ballot measures.
Ballot measures, you mean like vote yes on Prop 3 to legalize something?
Exactly. Because a ballot measure isn't a candidate, it's a piece of legislation. The Supreme Court has been much more hesitant to restrict spending on them, citing the First Amendment. It's about speech on issues, not on candidates.
So enter Hans-Gerd Wess.
The Swiss billionaire. According to financial records, he has donated $245 million to the 1630 Fund and its sister nonprofit, the New Venture Fund, since 2016.
$245 million. And the fund's defense is always, don't worry, we keep his money in a separate, segregated pot.
Right. They claim his money is only used for issue advocacy and ballot measures, not for electing candidates. But as any accountant will tell you, money is fungible.
It's all green.
It's all green. If Weiss's money pays for all the overhead, the staff salaries, the rent, and the ballot measure campaigns, that just frees up all the other donors' money to be spent hammering candidates.
It's all one ecosystem. And in 2024, they leaned hard into this ballot measure strategy. The fund spent $37 million on ballot measures in 25 different states on hot-button topics like abortion rights and election laws.
And they're incredibly effective at it. Their own data shows they have a 77.4% success rate on the ballot measures they back. That is a better win rate than most professional politicians.
But it's causing a real backlash. I read that Ohio actually passed a ban on foreign spending on ballot campaigns specifically to stop this kind of money flow.
They did. And what happened? The 1630 Fund abruptly stopped spending there, which, kind of confirms that foreign money was a key part of their strategy in the state.
Okay, so that's the left's incubator, model fast, pop-up groups, all run out of a centralized hub. Let's pivot to the right, the heavyweight champion of the right, Americans for Prosperity, and the Koch network.
Now, if the 1630 Fund is a pop-up army, then Americans for Prosperity, or AFP, is a standing army.
A permanent infrastructure. That's a great way to put it.
Yes. AFP is the flagship of the Koch network. While 1630 creates these temporary groups for specific campaigns and then they vanish, AFP maintains permanent chapters in 36 states. They have staff, offices, volunteers on the ground year-round.
It's been described by political scientists as America's third biggest political party.
I think that's a fitting description. They don't just show up for elections. They're lobbying on legislation in the off years. They're building grassroots networks constantly. But in 2024, they surged. AFP Action, which is their super PAC arm, spent more than $157 million in the cycle.
And what was their main focus? Where did that money go?
They were heavily involved in key Senate races, as you'd expect, and their big policy push was making the Trump tax cuts permanent. But again, you have to look at the dark money connection. AFP Action is a super PAC, so it discloses donors, but it receives a lot of its funding from allied nonprofits.
Like One Nation, the group we mentioned earlier with the Wisconsin ads.
Exactly. One Nation is the primary dark money group aligned with Senate Republicans. They spent $123 million in 2024. $53 million of that went directly to TV ads, which made them the top dark money TV spender in the whole cycle.
And the rest.
And they funneled another $63 million directly to the Senate Leadership Fund, which is the main super PAC for Senate Republicans.
So again, the nonprofit feeds the super PAC. The ecosystem is identical to the one on the left, just with different donors and different policy goals.
The mechanics are indifferent to ideology. It's all just about the efficient movement of capital to influence outcomes.
Now, speaking of spending, I want to take a bit of a detour into something that the research called the Luigi effect. This is mentioned under the AFP section, but it seems to apply to the broader political climate. And honestly, this felt like the most tangible, real-world cost of all this dark money.
This is a fascinating, albeit pretty grim, reality of the current cycle. The term Luigi effect comes from the private security industry, and it's a reference to the accused shooter of the United Healthcare CEO. But in the political sphere, it refers to this terrifying spike in threat levels against public figures, operatives, and even their families.
We've been talking about the billions spent on ads.
Yeah.
But there's a kinetic cost to all this spending. When you pump $1.9 billion of dark money into the ecosystem, primarily to fund negative, emotionally charged, often scary attack ads, you are effectively paying to raise the political temperature of the entire country.
You are purchasing outrage. That is the product you are selling. And the market reaction to that manufactured outrage is a massive inflation in the cost of security. We looked at the numbers. An elite 204/7 security detail isn't a luxury perk anymore for these people. It's a survival necessity for high-profile operatives on both sides.
What kind of numbers are we even talking about here? It sounds expensive.
An elite 10-man security detail can cost $25,000 to $30,000 a day.
A day?
That's
almost $10 million a year. Just for security.
Exactly. Now think about the economics of that. If you're a grassroots leader or a corporate reformer or just someone trying to challenge the establishment without big institutional backing, can you afford $900,000 a month just to stay safe?
No, absolutely not. So who can participate in high-stakes politics? Only the people who are backed by massive institutional money that could absorb those kinds of security costs as a line item.
It pushes the regular person out of the arena, and it creates this bizarre feedback loop. This gets us to what some researchers call the activist's dilemma. Dark money groups often fund the safe, corporate-friendly advocacy, the TV ads, the mailers. But when the grassroots energy they've whipped up boils over into extreme protests or deeply polarized rhetoric, it can create a backlash.
It raises the temperature, which increases the danger, which then increases the cost of security. So you have this insane cycle where billions are spent to agitate voters, which then necessitates spending millions more to protect the very people who are doing the agitating.
It's a self-perpetuating economy of outrage. And the price of admission for participation is getting higher every single year.
Let's move on to Section 4, because the 2024 presidential race saw a really major strategic shift in how campaigns actually operate on the ground. We saw the outsourcing of the ground game.
This was a genuine game changer. Historically, the campaigns themselves run their own get-out-the-vote efforts. They hire the canvassers, they knock on the doors, they own the data. But a series of recent FEC rulings allowed campaigns to coordinate much more closely with super PACs, specifically on things like canvassing.
So the campaigns basically said, wait, why should we pay for this massive, expensive operation if the super PACs have unlimited money and are legally allowed to do it for us?
Exactly. Why burn through your hard-donated, limited campaign funds when an outside group can pick up the tab? Trump, for instance, outsourced a huge chunk of his swing state ground game to a super PAC that was reportedly run by Elon Musk.
And Harris did very similar things with super PACs run by longtime party operatives.
Right. And this brings us to the specific dark money giants that were operating in the presidential race. On the pro-Harris side, the 800-pound gorilla was a group called Future Forward USA Action.
That's the 501c's, the dark money part.
That's the nonprofit, yes. They poured $304 million into ads and contributions to its allied super PAC.
I read a stat in one of the reports that said $1 out of every $6 of undisclosed money in the entire 2024 cycle came through this single group.
That is correct. One group. It's a staggering concentration of financial firepower. $304 million from donors who will likely never, ever be known to the public.
And on the Trump side, who are the big players?
You had a group called Building America's Future. This is a 501c4 that reportedly received significant funding from Elon Musk. They contributed about $35 million to super PACs, but their tactics were, let's say, distinct.
How so?
They ran what some people in the industry call PSYOP ads. They actually ran ads that, on the surface, seemed to be pro-Harris.
Wait, hold on. A pro-Trump group was running pro-Harris ads. Why on earth would they do that?
It's a very sophisticated micro-targeting strategy. They would run ads aimed at very specific demographics, say conservative-leaning independent voters or specific religious groups, that highlighted Harris's support for divisive policies that those groups hate. The ad looked like it was celebrating her stance. Kamala Harris proudly supports X, but the real intent was to alienate that specific viewer who was repulsed by policy X.
That is incredibly cynical. You're weaponizing your opponent's own platform against them by pretending to support it to the right audience.
It's next-level strategic communication. And then you had Securing American Greatness, another pro-Trump group. They're a great example of the pop-up model. They incorporated in March of 2024, very late in the game, And then just spent $81 million in a flash?
Pop up, spend big, and then probably disappear.
That is the pattern.
But all of this spending on TV ads, it feels very 20th century, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We all live on our phones now. Section 5 is about the digital frontier. And if TV's the Wild West, the internet is, what, deep space?
It's the Wild West without a sheriff, or even the concept of a sheriff. The total online political spending hit $1.9 billion in 2024. That figure mirrors the total dark money figure, which is telling.
And the regulations online are far, far looser than on television.
No, much looser. A TV station has an FCC license to protect. Online platforms have terms of service. The Brennan Center analyzed a sample of $619 million in online spending. They found that 45% of it came from spenders who were concealing some or all of their donors.
Almost half of the money is gray or dark.
And even crazier, there was a category they just called unknown. $109 million came from groups where the form of organization couldn't even be identified by researchers.
So we don't even know if it's a 501c4 or a shell company. It's just an entity, a name on a credit card buying ads.
It's a digital ghost, a website, a Facebook page, an ad account. And this profound lack of transparency opens the door wide for foreign influence operations.
And we saw this with a group called Tenet Media. This story really blew my mind because it sounded like it was ripped from a spy novel.
It really does. The Department of Justice released an indictment alleging that Russian intelligence operatives funneled $10 million to Tenet Media, which is based in Tennessee.
Walk us through the mechanics of that. How does money from the Kremlin end up in the pocket of an American YouTuber?
It's a classic layering scheme. The money didn't come from a wire transfer from the Kremlin bank, obviously. It moved through a series of shell companies in places like Turkey, the UAE, and Mauritius. It was disguised as payments for electronics or other commercial goods.
It's laundered multiple times, and then it lands clean in Tenet Media's bank account in Tennessee.
Right. And what was Tenet Media doing? It was hiring prominent American influencers, mostly right-wing commentators with big followings, to produce slick video content.
And the money they were paying these influencers, it wasn't small change. This wasn't a couple $100 for a post.
It was astronomical. One contract that was revealed in the indictment was reportedly for $400,000 a month. $100,000 per video.
For perspective, that is more than most members of Congress make in 2 years for a single video.
Exactly. And the influencers, for their part, claim they were victims, that they had no idea the money was Russian. And plausible deniability is the currency of the realm here. But look at the content they were being paid to produce.
It wasn't just Russia's great, was it? It was much more subtle.
It was pure divisiveness. The content was tailored to set Americans against each other. It was anti-Ukraine aid narratives. It was content designed to stoke racial tension. It was constantly questioning the integrity of U.S. elections.
So as a voter, I'm just scrolling TikTok or X, and I see a viral meme or a really passionate, well-produced video from a guy who looks like a totally independent thinker. I assume it's just organic grassroots sentiment, but it might be funded by a Russian oligarch or dark money nonprofit.
And you have absolutely no way of distinguishing between genuine public opinion and a paid foreign intelligence operation. That is the fundamental danger. It creates an echo chamber where platform algorithms amplify this paid content, and eventually reality itself gets distorted.
It's terrifying. But influence isn't just about attack ads and Russian bots. There's a softer side to this whole industry too. Section 6. Cultural influence and narrative control.
This is the soft power aspect of the influence game. If dark money is the hard power of direct electioneering, this is the long game of shaping the culture.
And here we can look at something like Higher Ground Productions.
The Obama's production company, they have a massive multi-year deal with Netflix.
Now, to be fair, producing a documentary is not the same thing as running a super PAC ad hammering a political opponent.
It's not. It's a completely different category. But it is part of the broader political influence industry. Look at the content they choose to produce. American Factory, it's a very pro-union film that gives a nuanced but ultimately positive view of organized labor. The G Word, which is based on Michael Lewis's book, is essentially a full-throated defense of the administrative state and the competence of government.
So it's not saying vote for Kamala Harris, but it is creating a cultural soil where the ideas and worldview of the Democratic Party can grow more easily.
Exactly. It's narrative control. It's about defining who the heroes and villains of our society are. If you can control the story, you will eventually control the vote.
And this connects back to that activist dilemma we touched on earlier, the one regarding extreme protests.
Yes. There was a fascinating study from the University of Toronto. It found that extreme actions like activists blocking highways or engaging in aggressive protests can actually cost movements popular support.
Even among people who might otherwise agree with the cause.
Yes, that's the key finding. They ran experiments and found that showing people footage of extreme anti-Trump protests actually increased support for Trump among neutral observers. It's a powerful backlash effect.
So if we connect the dots here, the smart money, the dark money, often funds the safe, corporate-friendly advocacy, like the polished 501c ads or the high production value documentaries. They want control of the message.
While at the same time, the grassroots energy they've helped to create often boils over into these more extreme activities that might be counterproductive to the goal of winning an election. There's a very complex tension there. The dark money groups are almost acting as the managers of the movement, trying to keep it palatable enough to win, while simultaneously fueling the very polarization that makes those extremes more likely.
It's a total paradox. They pay to create the outrage, but then they try to control how that outrage is expressed.
And usually they fail to control it, and hence you get the Luigi effect and the spiral and security costs we talked about.
So let's try to wrap this all up. What does all of this actually mean? We've got $1.9 billion in secret money. We have shell companies, foreign loopholes, digital ghosts, and Russian money laundering schemes.
I think the conclusion, when you look at all of it together, is clear. We are witnessing the erasure of accountability.
The erasure of accountability, that really feels like the headline for the whole 2024 cycle.
We are moving rapidly toward a system where the volume of money is skyrocketing, but the visibility of its source is plummeting. The Brennan Center, in its report, calls it a trust deficit.
Which makes sense. If I don't know who's trying to persuade me, why should I trust the message?
Exactly. Voters don't know who is speaking to them anymore. Is it a neighbor down the street? Is it a corporation with a specific regulatory interest? Is it a foreign government? Is it a single billionaire who wants a tax cut?
And it feels like a Hydra problem every time we try to regulate one part of it.
You cut off one head, two more grow back. We limited direct contributions to candidates. We got super PACs. We mandated disclosure for super PACs. We got 501c4s. We tried to regulate TV. The money just floods to online influencers and digital ads.
And again, it's so important to reiterate, this is a bipartisan problem.
100%. The data shows Democrats led in dark money spending this cycle, $1.2 billion versus $664 million, but the mechanisms are identical. Both sides are playing the game because there's a belief that if you unilaterally disarm, if you don't play, you lose. It's a classic prisoner's dilemma.
That's a pretty depressing thought, but it does seem to be the reality.
It is the reality of the current legal and regulatory landscape. Until the tax code or the Supreme Court rulings change in a fundamental way, this is the system we have.
Well, on that cheery note, we have to wrap up, but I do want to leave our listener, the learner, with one final thought to mull over.
Go for it.
We use the phrase knowledge is power all the time, but in this ecosystem we've just described, the teachers, the entities that are funding the information we consume every day, are almost completely invisible.
That's a powerful image, the invisible teacher.
So here's the question for you as you're listening right now. The next time you see a political ad or a viral meme or even a very slick, persuasive documentary, do you stop to ask, who paid for this?
And perhaps even more importantly, who benefits from me believing this?
Because in a $1.9 billion game of hide and seek, the one thing you can be absolutely sure of is that someone's paying for your attention.
And they almost always expect a return on that investment.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Keep asking questions. We'll see you next time.